Sacoby again here. I think that's my name. Yeah, I'm tired. Starting to get that Barry White voice now. Yeah, because I'm so tired. Okay, sorry, been bad. So we're at our closing session. It's been a great 3 days. But remember, this is not the end of the symposium. We have the after symposium celebration. I'm gonna keep emphasizing that because it's like a lot of hors d'oeuvres. I used to say that word, a lot of amuse bouches that I need y'all to eat and take home with y'all. Okay. So just want to emphasize that y'all stay for that food. Got all kinds of crab cake, this crab cake. Got shrimp, prawns. You got salmon. That's how you say it from Mississippi. You got all other hors d'oeuvres. We got fruit. We got all kinds of fruit. We got coffee. We got lemonade. We got drinks. A cash bar, but you got to pay for it yourself. Cash bar, right? That's what that means. I don't drink, so I don't understand that. But okay. So this is the time to celebrate all the hard work of everyone in this momentous occasion. And so I want to close with this. We have our closing panel. Our theme has been energy versus power, visions for the future. But as you heard me say before, people modify that. It's energy and power. You need energy to build power. And we're at a point in time in this, in our country where we need to push for energy justice. Environmental justice is energy justice is climate justice, right? And so our closing panel today is we need more power, opportunities for equity and access to clean energy. And we had 3 panelists with us today. Our 4th panelist, Gilbert, had a baby. So, he had to take care of family. So let's congratulate Gilbert, president, co-founder of Vote Energy. But we have today is 3 speakers. We have Tom Cormons, who's executive director, Appalachian Voices, and he's another member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. As a founding member and executive director, it's the first Appalachian Voices office. The office was opened in 2007. But it wasn't until 2013 that Tom took over as ED. Under his leadership, this is the first Virginia office, and the organization has expanded to include a variety of new programs and offices in Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Tom's going to talk a lot about these energy justice issues, energy equity issues, and what we need to do to really focus on utilities. Don't let utilities fool you with what they're trying to do. And that, as you heard from the Reverend today, with the bill, Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to have to pay attention to utilities. We want to give our taxpayers money to utilities to keep poisoning people who are already being poisoned. That's what you heard from Reverend, right? We have Paula Glover, President, Alliance to Save Energy. She's served in that role since 2021. Has been a board of directors member since 2017. She's a dynamic leader with more than 25 years of experience in the energy industry. And she's the 7th president in the 45-year history of the Alliance. Her leadership is driven by her belief that universal adoption of energy efficiency is foundational to achieving energy affordability, economic growth, and decarbonization. So let's welcome Ms. Glover too. And also go back to welcome Tom as well. I apologize. Welcome Tom as well. Give him a hand. And we also, now we have Mustafa Santiago Ali. As I joked with Mustafa earlier with his top, I almost wore pink today, so we would have been matching with our, but the missus told me not to wear pink. I think she made a good decision. But he's executive vice president of the National Wildlife Federation. But I almost wore my blue, let me stop being bad. National Wildlife Federation. He's a renowned leader, international speaker, policymaker, community liaison, trainer, facilitator, and has an honorary doctorate. He wears many hats. He also wears, again, many ties. As he's executive vice president of the National Wildlife Federation. He was the vice president of environmental justice, climate, and community revitalization. So that's a new role for him. And a new colleague, Dr. Adrian House, is now the vice president of environmental justice, climate, and community revitalization at the National Wildlife Federation. He's also the founder of Revitalization Strategies, a business focused on moving our most vulnerable communities from, as he likes to say, surviving to thriving. And again, let's go back to Reverend's lecture, his keynote. How are we going to do this bill, right, and implement it where it may end up not sending people from surviving to thriving, right, but really send people more in a super survival mode? I mean, we're maybe dooming some folks based on what the Reverend said today. So being cognizant of how we need to really be moving with these energy legislation, with the infrastructure bill, with Justice 40, from surviving to thriving. So let's get started. So this is going to be a discussion, y'all. There's no PowerPoint. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to focus on Justice 40. So starting with Tom. The Justice 40 Initiative's main focus is making good on President Biden's promise to deliver at least 4% of the overall benefits from federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities to ensure that overburdened and underserved resource communities, get what they deserve. Is focusing on benefits enough? What about investments? Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, thank you. It's been great to hear so much good discussion on multiple panels about Justice 40 today, and to be leaning into that here because it really has the potential to be transformative. The idea is transformative. The president's executive order, one of the first things that President Biden did after taking office, the executive order on tackling the climate crisis, really centered justice for communities that have been historically disadvantaged and on the receiving end of all the negative externalities and implications of our energy system. It also centered those communities that are in a major transition right now and a major economic upheaval as we switch to new sources of energy. And in concept, committed the resources of the federal government, really our collective goodwill and resources, to aiding and giving back to those places. And the idea that we're going to take 40% of investments in the energy transition and the remediation that is necessary based on past harm done, and ensure that it's targeted at the places that need it and deserve it the most, that's transformative. But there's a difference between a transformative idea and a transformed reality. And the link that we need there, of course, is top-notch implementation. And I will put in a plug for the set of recommendations that my colleagues and I in the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council approved just over a week ago. Actually, I checked earlier. They're not up on the website yet, but they should be there soon, on Justice 40 implementation. And actually have a copy here because there are a few concepts that I really wanted to highlight. The basic gist of the concern that I think a lot of advocates have is that just pumping money into a system doesn't necessarily transform things. In fact, it can perpetuate some existing structures and inequities. Money tends to flow where money has flowed in the past. So how do we transcend that and shake things up and implement in a way that's as transformative as the vision to achieve a scenario where we're building the power that it takes to receive and utilize and thrive as a result of this kind of investment. Now, we have an entire section of those recommendations entitled Transformative Practices. It's looking at some of the impediments, the need for capacity building for communities that may not have experience getting grants. It asks agencies to take a look and see, okay, who's been left behind in the past? Look at the grants that you've given out over the many years, and where are the holes? Who's not getting those benefits, and then lean in a targeted way to assist communities that have been left out and are in need. Communication and outreach is just absolutely foundational because I have tremendous respect for the administration officials and staff people at every level who are working weekends and nights to do something that is utterly new and different and exciting and transformative. Do people in Washington, D.C. really understand what people in the impacted communities need, how to generate wealth, how to transform those places, not as well as people who are embedded there and understand those places deeply? So that listening, that outreach to let people know what you're doing, that they have an opportunity to comment, just extraordinarily important. It's not something agencies are necessarily deeply practiced at doing. So to get to that question about investments and benefits, I think that one thing that needs to happen is investments need to be tracked. We need to see where the dollars are going, and that's going to be very important for evaluation. Because if supposedly the benefits are going to, targeted communities where they're most needed, but actually a lot of the money is flowing, somewhere else, that's a dissonance that's going to be extremely problematic. But I think equally important is ensuring that the benefits are true benefits, that there are the things that are most needed and most helpful, and that's where the communication input is paramount.
Thank you. Go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, I think I want to kind of pick up on what you just said, Tom. I think it's really important for us to really understand what benefits means. Mm-hmm. So, right, we know that this is 40%. It is to disadvantaged communities who are impacted by pollution. And so I add that last part of the sentence because that's important. There are a lot of Black and brown communities who are disadvantaged, but it may not be because of pollution, and they may not get just this $40. And so really, we need to be really clear on how the government is defining those communities that will receive dollars. Then you have to really be clear on what does that mean by benefit, okay? And benefit in an energy system. And so are we talking about an economic benefit? Are we talking about job creation? Are we really just talking about ensuring that those are the communities who get the first shot at upgrading their infrastructure so that they can fully participate in this new economy? Because the reality is that for many of these communities, the existing infrastructure would make it almost impossible for you to participate without investment. Okay, so, understanding how all those things are tied together and how those are defined, and then understanding how agencies define success for themselves. And so we've seen in the Infrastructure Jobs Act, a lot of money come out. We now have seen a lot of other investment as part of this Inflation Reduction Act. And one of the things that we do in our organization is track the rules and input into the rules and be a part of that process. And so when agencies are issuing RFIs and they're trying to figure out how to define things and build these rules, we as an organization really make it our business to be a part of that process and feed into that process so that on the other side of this spend, we all collectively understand whether or not we did it right. And then this the final thing, and Tom pointed to, right, is this space on capacity building. So we have Justice 40. We also have the Justice 40 Accelerator, which is really designed to push money into these nonprofits and other small community-based organizations so that they can then build the capacity so that they are able and ready to respond. My biggest fear with all this is always that we are in crisis mode when we think about decarbonization and climate. And sometimes when you're in crisis mode, then you're moving so fast that the things that you need to do to bring people along, you skip over, right? And so we as a collective have to decide how are we going to ensure that while we are in a moment of urgency, that we will take the time that is required to engage communities in the way that Tom described, because that actually takes time, particularly if there are communities that you have not been engaged with and have not spoken to ever, right? You move at the speed of trust. And what you don't want is people to say, yeah, that's really important, but we have this crisis. And so we'll get to that part later, because I can promise you that if we decide that we're going to get to it later, we're not going to get to it later. We're not. We have been waiting as communities for hundreds of years. And so that is always, my concern, that the urgency drives the decision-making. And in that urgency, communities are left behind.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to add, we talk about the 17 principles of environmental justice again. I only really remember two. I can quote, but principles 5 and 7. Self-determination, community voice, right? Recognitional justice. If you don't have recognitional justice right, community's voice, then what are we doing? Okay, I know it's more than this. I know others, Mustafa, besides 5 and 7. Just wanted to say that real quickly. Now go to you, Mustafa.
You want the 17 principles? Is that what
Nah, bruh, go ahead.
Because the first principle is about honoring Mother Earth.
Yeah, we know.
If we did that right, we wouldn't be having these conversations right now.
Yes, sir.
So James Baldwin once said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you don't see. So the words that I'm going to share are out of love, because of all the work that many of the folks in this room have done for decades now. those who worked in the federal government and gave their blood, sweat, and tears to try and make transformation actually happen and to make sure that the disinvestment that has been happening in our communities was no longer a part of the paradigm, so that we could actually be able to focus on making sure that our communities move from surviving to thriving. So out of love, you know, I'm just a country boy with a sprinkling of city on me, you know, raised in Appalachia and in Detroit. And where I come from, you know, when I think about 40%, you know, when I see someone tell me that we've now got $40 billion or $60 billion out of $370 billion, that doesn't add up to 4%. So that gives me pause right there, because if that is supposed to be the base that we're working from, then there's some dollars missing someplace. And some dollars have been shifted to others who may have played a role in actually the sets of situations that we find ourselves dealing with. When I think about the opportunities that exist inside of the Inflation Reduction Act, I ask these questions. If we've got 200 to 300,000 people dying prematurely every year in our country from air pollution, will this make a difference? When we've got 24 million folks who are suffering from asthma and 7 million kids, and disproportionately it is Black and brown, who are the ones who are going to the emergency rooms and the ones who are losing their lives, how does this help to make a difference? When 60 million people in our country over the last decade have dealt with unsafe drinking water, does it make a difference? So we all understand that there has been significant disinvestment that has happened inside of our communities, and as my brothers and sisters have just shared, what we have to do is to be focused on how do we make sure there's real accountability inside of these sets of dollars and actions, and how does our voice drive and make sure that there's real change inside of our communities. So let me just take y'all back a little bit, because we're focused on this moment, which is a very important moment. It can be a transformational moment, even though there are some huge gaps that exist inside of the IRA. If you know that we were working on something called the Build Back Better, which had a number of different types of sets of opportunities that were in there, one might ask the question, if a number of agencies and departments that have responsibility for environmental justice with 2 different executive orders now, would you make sure that you had a Environmental Justice Advisory Council in each one of those, so that when people need to move forward on these sets of resources, that they have a place to go, and then that information can be filled up to the body that my brother sits on? Question to ask yourself. The other question to ask yourself is, if we know that a significant amount of these resources are actually going to go to the states, wouldn't we make sure that the folks who are working in the states have the competencies that are necessary and the capacity to be able to achieve the goals? And if we don't, then they can always fall back like they always have and said, well, you know what? We just didn't have the resources that were necessary. We just didn't have the training that was necessary. Wouldn't we make sure that there is an environmental justice analysis for each one of the programs that I can actually repeat to you of those sets of resources? And if there isn't, the question has to be, why not? Because if we don't have those things in place, then we give folks the opportunity to say, I just didn't have time to get that done. It wasn't yet a priority for my governor or my state legislature to be able to move forward. How do we know that this already exists? If you pick up or open the paper today, you will see in certain states, and I'm not going to get political here because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, that there are folks who are sending money back for critical programs that are focused on infrastructure across the nation. Whether it is from healthcare dollars, housing dollars, or a number of others. I raise this forward out of love because we have to understand the game that we are about to move into. That if we don't make sure that these structural pieces are in place, it makes it so much more difficult for us to achieve the goals that each and every one of you are willing to do 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to make real change happen. These are the basic elements that have to be in place. And if they are not, then you're going to find folks running to the courts to try and slow things down, just like they did with the farmers, Black farmers. By a show of hands, how many folks know of or remember what just went down with the Black farmers? Because I want to see what kind of room I'm in. All right, so some folks need to take your phone out and you need to Google the Black farmers and see the dynamics that they had to deal with. Now, there have been some changes and some lessons have been learned. But Sacoby, when going back to your initial question, and you know, everybody knows I was raised in a family of Baptist and Pentecostal ministers, so I talk for a little while sometimes. That, when we're talking about benefits, that's one side of the equation.
Yes, sir.
But I'm going to ask each and every one of you, if you go to the bank and you go to sign up for a loan and you tell them, well, I got a bunch of benefits, how many times are they going to give you the loan? But if you say, I have set amount of capital, I have set amount of dollars to be able to make sure that I'm ensuring what's going on, and on the other hand of it, to be able to leverage, that's a different dynamic. So I share this out of love, not because I want to dampen anything, because I want us to be prepared for the things that we are going to be dealing with here from the time the president signs that incredibly important piece of legislation to the 10-year time frame that some of the dollars will be utilized for. And there are other dollars that have a shorter time frame, and we can talk about that. But with all that being said, I wanted to make sure that we have the right foundation to understand the work that we still have to do.
Thank you, sir. So I'm gonna move to this next question. So go to Paula first. More than 25% of U.S. households face a high energy burden, spending at least 6% of household income on energy. Disproportionate number of these folks are Hispanic, Black, and Native American households. So as the nation looks to move towards a just transition away from dirty fossil fuels, what safeguards are in place to make this transition equitable and accessible for those populations? How will communities impacted by this transition away from dirty sources of energy see again the benefits or incentives?
So I think, you know, what Brother Mustafa said is really the response to that question, right? Which is that if we are not, what often I think happens in Washington in terms of policy is that we see a bill signed and there's an appropriation and then we think we're good, right? It's 300 million, $500 million, whatever it is. Okay, we got the money and we're all good. And we don't really realize that that's actually the very first step. And then every step after that is really what ensures the things that you're talking about. So I will just say for my association, because I am focused on energy efficiency is foundational to any transition that we have. And that while we always talk about energy burden, we also need to talk about energy insecurity and energy poverty. Those things are linked, but they are different. And so I believe that efficiency, ensuring that every household not only has access to, but can afford efficiency measures. And I mean the basics, that's insulation, windows, doors, but I'm also talking about efficient heating systems, cooling systems, all of that other stuff. And it is super duper expensive. And I will tell you that the way that this even new legislation is written, one of the things that we at the Alliance are thinking deeply about is that most of the incentives in these programs either happen at the state level through your various regulatory bodies, public service commissions and the like, or through tax incentives, right? And so the IRA is awesome that they've increased the tax credits that homeowners can receive if they adopt energy efficiency measures, and they've increased what they went away from what was a lifetime cap of $500 to $1,200 a year. But here is the rub, and because the devil is always in the details, and really important to understand the connectedness of this all. Those who itemize on their taxes are going to be eligible for a tax credit. And the reality is that almost 50% of American homeowners don't itemize their taxes. Okay, 50%, even if you own your house, if you do not itemize your taxes, and when the standard tax rate went up in 2017, that then decreased the number of people who own a home and who actually itemize. And so what do we do about them? That's problem number one, and I'm only talking about half homeowners, right? So now we've got to think about what are the other incentives that we do for folks who aren't going to itemize their taxes. So for example, you'll see in the Inflation Reduction Act now a point of sale rebate for electric vehicles. The difference being that prior to that, you could get a rebate, but you had to buy the car first, fill out whatever paperwork you fill out, send that in to whomever you send it into, and then you wait for your money to come back to you. Mm-hmm. Now what we're saying, at least for electric cars starting in 23, is when you go to purchase that car, you get that rebate automatically. We do not do that with efficiency products, and we need to start doing that. Mm-hmm. And so understanding like how these programs are built together. And why I mentioned regulators in this specific example is because it's not just the utility companies. It is the regulators who make the decisions as to how these programs are going to be built, and quite frankly, who gets to implement the program. And so in some states, you will be talking about a utility company, and in other states, you're going to be talking about a third-party provider. And so all of this stuff is really connected. And so burden, which is 6%, right? More than 6% of your income goes to your energy costs. That's driven by your housing, where you live, what type of housing you have, how much you make, and what your rates are. Insecurity is how many times do you see a shut-off notice during the course of a year? And what we know is that 50% of African Americans, 40% of Latino households and others get one at least once a month. Most get multiple times, right? So we also have that issue that we're dealing with. And then we're talking about energy poverty, and that is when the households and people make the choice to not use their heat, even when it's cold, or to not turn on the air, even when it's hot, as a way to save money on their bills. I believe that efficiency can resolve these issues, but I also am fully aware that the programs that we have in place today are not nearly enough to get us there. And then from my previous thing, if you do not have the proper infrastructure in place today, and if these monies don't come down and do that for you, none of the other stuff happens. There is no demand response. There is no microgrid if you do not have the right infrastructure in your community. And that includes broadband. That includes broadband. So broadband is directly tied to what this future looks like. And so as those of us who work in policy, we provide a systems thinking approach so that I understand that I can't advocate for this if I need this thing as the foundation to make my thing work. I need to partner with someone who advocates for that to make sure that we're going to get the whole system taken care of. But that would be also for you all to know that it's not just one thing that you're trying to deal with, you're dealing with multiples, but also that you want to broaden the stakeholder group and the partnerships that you have, because there are those out there who are absolutely only focused on getting broadband into communities for telehealth, for education, for whatever that is. And if you are not interested, you might want to jump on that bandwagon if you're thinking about a clean energy future.
Ooh, thank you. Let's go to Tom next.
Right?
Yeah, I can jump right off from that last point. I really think it's all about that collaborative, full circle power building, because energy burden, energy insecurity, energy poverty, the extent of those problems does not have a technical reason. There's no technical reason why energy should be so expensive for so many people in relation to the resources that they have, and frankly, a lot more costly for just about everyone than it needs to be. But it really comes down to power, and the fact that in our system, those who stand to benefit from keeping power more expensive than it needs to be, exert tremendous influence over the regulatory system, and energy efficiency is the single most cost-effective way to address energy demand. Of course, we need an array of solutions. Is that something that incumbent electric utilities are going to want to promote? If it diminishes the amount of electricity they can sell, the amount of generation they can build, and charge captive ratepayers who can't go elsewhere because they're tied to a monopoly for the cost of building, they're not. And we have states like Virginia, for example, where the utilities have essentially been put in charge of energy efficiency. Well, how's that going to work out? So it really comes down to, seizing the technical and technological approaches that we have to addressing the problem, taking advantage of things like the very considerable federal resources that are going to help to bring down the cost of clean energy. To do that, we have to organize around the public interest, because otherwise private interests are going to carry the day, and those benefits are just not going to trickle down to most of us.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mustafa.
W.E.B. Du Bois once shared with us that a system cannot fail those it was never meant to protect. Think about that for a second, because the systems that have been put in place before were never meant to protect Black and Brown and Indigenous and Asian and Pacific Islander and lower wealth white communities as well. So if we understand that that is a starting point, then we understand that we can begin to unpack where these injustices have lived and how we begin to change those. What are the tools that we have that we can utilize to be able to hold people accountable? How do we make sure that our public service commissioners or energy commissioners in states across our nation are held accountable? Well, right, once we come back on Capitol Hill here in a couple of weeks, there's going to be some work that's going to be done around permit reform, because we understand that that is a part of how we've gotten to where we got. That when it came to that, our communities had never been given any significant consideration about what was going on. You know, our energy systems that were built were very similar to our transportation systems, to our medical systems, and a number of others that did not see our folks. And we all know when I say our folks, who I'm talking about, it's the folks who are in this room. Everybody look around, because that's important for us to actually see each other so that we humanize, and so that if we talk about building authentic collaborative partnerships, then we know what that's going to end up meaning. So when folks come back on Capitol Hill, folks should be engaging about what our sets of expectations are, because there also were those conversations that you saw in the news about things like the Mountain Valley Pipeline and a number of other pipelines that are going on across our country. Now, it's a curious matter, and Sacoby, I'll get to the substance of this question in 1 second, but we've got 2 million miles of fossil fuel pipeline in our country. So how could anyone ever have legitimacy in building more? Especially when we know that we have to make the transition if we want to actually literally be in a situation that gives us an opportunity to just survive, not to thrive, but just to survive. So that's one of the tools that we know that's out there. So those sets of actions, both on Capitol Hill and then pushing in our respective states on how this will play out. The other part of it, I know we're going to end up talking about, because I know the other two panelists well enough that they understand, and many of you understand, that the other part of this set of dynamics is the civic process. It is democracy, but it is also about our vote. Why is our vote important? Because lots of times we only look at what's happening on that national level for who's going to be president and vice president, maybe Senate and maybe the House, and we forget about these important offices that exist inside of each and every one of our states. Why is it that we are not focused on public service commissioners? They make so many decisions about how energy will and will not move, what are the dynamics that are going on inside of our states, and I bet you if I asked 999 people out of 1,000 in this room, who is your individual, he or she, most folks would have difficulty in being able to answer the question. There is power, there is leverage that exists for us to address the questions that Sacoby just put forward. You know, and we can unpack that, but I know we have a number of other questions, and I'll circle back around on some of this.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move to the next question. So when you think about the issues that you're outlining, I mean, I think you talked about the system, you know, wasn't really built for the people we're talking about. What larger systemic changes would you like to see to existing energy infrastructure? And that's kind of do maybe a lightning on this. I'll go to you first, Mustafa.
Well, I think energy infrastructure is incredibly important if we're going to make real change happen. The things that I would like to see us to make become real are a number. You know, we talked a little bit about electric vehicles and the new sets of resources that are in that space. We talked a little bit also about some of the energy efficiency stuff. But what I would like to see, Sacoby, is I would like to see more folks with real life experiences being a part of the process. Here's why. When we talk about heat pumps, when we talk about HVAC systems, when we talk about air conditioning, and many of the folks in this room understand that they're right now in this country, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, there at least 30 million people don't have access to air conditioning. And as my sister so aptly placed, that many folks are afraid to turn the unit on. But sometimes we don't also talk about the individuals that we know sometimes between 40 and 50% of African Americans don't own their homes. They are currently in rental situations. So have you brought that into the equation with folks who have actually lived this and can help you to have a better understanding of what's really going on? Here's the other question. And my brother here will be able to probably talk even more in depth about this. I used to lead something called the Interagency Working Group when I worked in the federal government. So what is the holistic strategy of these sets of dollars? If we know that most folks can't even get into a home, what are we doing to change that dynamic so that they can benefit from these sets of resources, especially if we have 10 years to utilize these dollars? So how are we going to make sure that folks actually be able to do the generational wealth thing and get into a home, and then make sure that we got solar on top of those roofs, and to make sure that we've got these new energy efficiencies that are in place? Or are we going to just put a veneer over top of the issues that are currently going on? This is the change that we have to do when we look at our energy systems. Here's the other part. We knew this moment was coming. And I hope folks take away from this. I'm excited. I am huge on the clean economy, as long as the clean economy actually represents what it's supposed to represent. Here's why, and then I'll hit my other point before I forget. When we look at the clean economy, ask yourselves this question. How many African American, how many Latinx brothers and sisters, how many indigenous brothers and sisters actually own their business in the clean economy? Anybody know the answer? Less than 2% of the businesses in that space. Wind, thermal, tidal, solar. Now, we got some folks who are working in this space, and that's great. Where does real power lie? Everybody, some folks have been in my classes when I teach about power dynamics. Power is about ownership. Power is about having the ability to actually hire other people inside of your neighborhood or your city or your county. So, Sacoby, when you ask me the question, I'm talking about a paradigm shift. I am talking about an expansion of bringing in a number of different federal agencies, foundations, maybe there are folks in the corporate space as well, meeting the needs of what everyday folks are asking for. If we're not doing that, then we're following an old paradigm. We're following the old fossil fuel paradigm that goes to that quote that I shared with you, of folks never having any intention about caring about our communities. We should be operating from a 21st century model that is holistically focused in our energy space, in our housing space, in our transportation space, in our public health space, in our environmental space, in our financial space, so that we are actually healing communities. That's my vision.
Ownership is power. Sovereignty is power. I said at the time, I think maybe via email. So I'm gonna come to you next time. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to jump off right on that. And Mustafa, really leaned in on that question of ownership. And I think it's easy to think in terms of metrics like dollars or jobs, but ownership is about some additional things. It's about wealth building, like who is actually benefiting from the wealth that capital generates. Is it Wall Street? Is it international markets? Or is it communities where the actual work is being done? Ownership also represents control. If ownership is located where activities are happening, or at least sensitive to, forced to be sensitive to, the places where the wealth building activity is happening, then it's going to need to be more responsible to those communities and those places.
Hey, Tom, real quick, can you give some models where it's happening for us, for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can talk for just a minute. I'm going to allude to a negative model that I know we might be circling back to more, but if the energy system is dominated by vertically integrated monopolies that control generation, transmission, and distribution, and everyone in a state-conferred service territory for that monopoly must buy their electricity from that entity because it's not legal under the law of the state for them to shop around or potentially buy electricity from their neighbor who might have solar generation. Then we're leaning into a system where the entire electrical grid, in this case, is often designed for the benefit of that very powerful corporation. It's a crazy feedback loop that we see in so many of our states, Virginia being unfortunately a shining example, where the state confers the monopoly, and supposedly the understanding is that the state then regulates that entity and ensures that it's acting in the public interest and not overcharging people. The problem is that those entities are at least in the case of Virginia, the single largest corporate campaign contributors to state level campaigns. And they typically, historically, have exerted capture over both the legislative and the executive branch, two out of three branches of government. Fortunately, the State Corporation Commission of Virginia, which is quasi-judicial, has been taking a hard look at what the utility is doing, but unfortunately having its hands tied by the other branches too much of the time. If there's a major structural change we need to see, it involves standing up to monopolies in favor of distributed ownership. And we've made some strides when people come together around common interests and values, and when politicians are forced to center that in some of their rhetoric and campaign promises, we're providing the right kinds of incentives, and we have seen positive change as a result of that. We have seen space opened up for non-utility actors to generate, sell, use electricity to greater extent than ever before since Virginia, for example, went to the regulated monopoly model. It does work, and that opens up all of these wealth building opportunities. We're going to be with partners creating hundreds of solar jobs in Virginia in the next number of years, and actually the coal bearing portion of the state, where there's tremendous pride in the role that people have played in generating electricity for their neighbors, for the nation. Seeing that go from an extractive industry to a generative industry is super positive. It's not the only thing that we need to do to ensure a just economic transition by any stretch, but when you're able to stand up to the political and economic power, of those who have been entrenched and in control for so long, some pretty amazing things can happen. So if there's a major structural shift I'd like to see, then it's in that direction.
Cool, thank you. Paula, you're next.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick up off of what Mustafa said, because I think it's this idea of creating wealth and building businesses really, in my mind, should be our priority. And it never seems to rise to the top. Like, jobs will get up to the top, but building your own business and creating your own business, even in this space, and this is, look, I've worked in energy 30 years. It is a high capital intense business to be in, but you can have a solar company. You can have an energy audit company. You can have an HVAC company. There are things that we can do as small business owners, right, that we can operate in our own communities, because the beauty of the work, a lot of this work, is that it's local, right? You're not going to get an energy auditor from Kentucky coming to Maryland. It's not economically viable for them to do that. That means you need to find people in Maryland to do that work. And I can tell you from the majors who hire energy service companies, their number one challenge is not workforce. It's finding companies that they can work with. It is the number one challenge of, I have 40 board members, and across the board, what they tell me is the biggest thing that they're challenged by is we cannot find enough small businesses to work with. And their biggest fear is that these hundreds of millions of dollars are going to come down and they're not going to be able to spend it because there's nobody to spend it with. This is an enormous opportunity, and it actually has probably a lower entry point than a lot of the other types of businesses that you can have in this industry. And so for those of you who may be interested in being an entrepreneur, I really, 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 really encourage you. The American Council on Renewable Energy, ACOR, actually has a mentorship program for minority entrepreneurs in energy, where their large corporate CEOs will mentor a small business to help them grow. And so we need to be thinking about that, right? Again, our sense of urgency cannot override us using our intellect based on what is good for us as a community. What is good for us as a community? And it can't just be climate and health. It has to be economic, because who wants to be healthy and broke and hungry?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Like, that's the reality. Like, I want to be healthy, but if I'm going to be hungry, broke, and homeless, I'm not quite sure what all that good health gets me. And so we do need to be thinking about all of these pieces. And so that is really what I would love to walk into a room and not be the only anymore. Like, how amazing would it be that somebody could, Mustafa knows it, that somebody can call me and I can say, you know what, there are too many people for me to name. Not, oh, what are you looking for? Oh, I know so-and-so and so-and-so and so who do that. Well, that's problematic.
Yes.
That's problematic. And so this is the opportunity that we have been given today above everything else. And then I think the second thing that Mustafa said that is really important is we must participate in the process. We can hate the process. The process can be racist, sexist, whatever, but it's still the process. And if we check and tap out of the process because we don't like it, I guarantee you it is not going to be better than it is today. Early in my career, I was a regulatory lobbyist. I sat before the commission all the time. And let me tell you, public comment from in front of a commission matters. You know why? Because nobody ever does it. Nobody ever shows up. And so when someone shows up and says, I don't like this because X, Y, Z, I promise you, those commissioners take that very seriously. They listen to that. And so we have to participate in the process. We can work simultaneously to break down this system, but if we spend all our time breaking down the system is still rattling while we're trying to dismantle it. And so we do have to participate if we want it to be better.
No, thank you for that. So important point about ownership. We gotta be in this sector. So I think y'all are making some important points about, wealth gap, inequality, and how if we don't do this right, this could be one of the biggest wealth transfers in the history of the country.
Absolutely. Right?
Not just across this bill, the previous infrastructure, and also CARES. That's a lot of money. And if it's not coming to the right communities, and then like you said, if we are not owning the businesses, because it's not good enough to just give somebody a job. I mean, because the job, that's kind of the easy narrative. We got jobs. But as I said before, I'll use my father's example. Even in this context, my dad was a pipe fitter. He got those jobs. He sent that money home to Mississippi. So even with the jobs, if the folks don't look, even they look like the folks, diversity, but don't come from the community, that still is not a benefit to those communities, right? So we got to focus on that part, but also, like you said, building the infrastructure, the capacity. So we talked a lot about community capacity building. We got to build capacity for people to actually own in this sector. So I just want to reemphasize that. Now, because we're a little bit behind, and I know, I don't want to hold y'all up all day. I know y'all want to get to some of this food. I'm going to try to do some lightning. I said lightning to you, Mustafa. You took 5 minutes. So I'm gonna say lightning again. I'm gonna say lightning again. I'm gonna try to hit a few questions. I'm being bad, but that's my frat boss. He can take it. A few questions. But I'm going to Ms. Glover first. So we talk about building this infrastructure capacity, and you don't want to be in the C-suite, the only person, like you named the 3 or 4 people. I talked about diversity, but what does DEI mean for you when it comes to being in those sectors, being in those spaces, and why we need to focus on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I advise a lot of executives around DEI, and I always tell them you start with equity and inclusion first. Like at the end of the day, if your workforce is not a workforce, an environment, a culture that I want to be in, all you're doing is having yourself a hamster wheel of folks coming in and out because they don't have time for that, right? And so that's a piece of it, right? Understanding these organizations. But what I would say for those of you who want to take a corporate path, and we need people to take a corporate path, right? We need people on the outside trying to break down the system. But quite frankly, you need people on the inside who are going to tell you where the cracks are, right? Because we're the only ones who see it. We know how this works. And so if you want to pursue in that way, you have to be tenacious. You just do. You have to be just as committed as someone who's on the other side. You have to create a village of people, right? So Mustafa and I know one another, but we've never worked together. But he's always known that if he wanted to know what was going on inside somewhere, he could call me from where I was and I would let him know. And I always knew that if I wanted to know something, I could call him and he would let me know, right? So we have our network and our village, and that's really important. So I encourage, and I'm always available for folks. Reach me on LinkedIn. I answer cold calls. Just don't try to sell me nothing. But to talk that through and to help people think about, there are lots of different entry points. 4-year degree, 6-year degree, no degree, you want to be a pipe fitter, you want to train to work on cybersecurity. There are lots of things that we can do internally as well. So we need to be thinking all of that, because some of the most successful minority business owners in this business are guys who worked in the business first. And then they came out and had a wires company, bought a wires company, and now they're doing business with the utility company they spent 20 years with and $250 million in revenue. That is another path. Mm-hmm. And so there are lots of different ways for us to do it. The last thing I would say is, look, be creative and innovative. We don't know what the final step is going to be. We actually don't know what the technologies are that are going to get us there by 2035, 2040, 2050, whatever your timeline is. We have no idea. We are guessing now, right? We are guessing now. And so for those of you who are interested in the sciences and being innovative in technology, we need more of that. We need more of that. And we need all of that brain power to get us there. And I believe that if the people who look like the people in this room are the ones to lead and do that work, then the people who are going to be working with you will also look like us, just like it worked in the old way. We hire those we're most comfortable with.
Exactly.
Right? Who y'all most comfortable with? Go ahead and create some stuff.
You said it, comfort and trust, that we're humans. That's what we do. I'm gonna go to Mustafa next. I want you to talk about, so we're talking about this again, this business side, 'cause I know one of the colleagues said we have focused more on the economic development, economic opportunity structure. So how are you doing that with your revitalization strategies? Focusing on, in this, as relates to energy justice, because what Tom said, the way the system set up right now, the title, what's the title of the session, y'all? Again, let me read this title. Opportunities to create equity, right? In access to clean energy. But what you're saying, the system right now is creating a lot of inequity in access to clean energy. So Mustafa, how can what you do help create that equity in access to clean energy? Go ahead.
Well, when I started revitalization strategies, I was actually thinking about somebody who's in this room, Dr. Marva King, when she used to run the collaborative problem solving model at EPA. And all those years, we saw that there were communities who were doing everything that they could to make change happen. But they were trying to figure out, how do I navigate this bureaucracy? What does this science mean? What does the law mean? What does the engineering types of things that I'm trying to figure out mean? So when I started revitalization strategies, I wanted to make sure that people had the information in a way that could actually resonate with them, that they could understand, that could help them to empower themselves, which is important, is that people empowering themselves so that they can move along the journey that they want to do. The other part of it was, I was like, you know what, if I could ever get some of these Fortune 500 companies to begin to change their structures, to make sure that environmental justice was a part of their priority setting, then that would be beneficial to folks. And hopefully it wouldn't be so adversarial, because folks actually now have a safe space to be able to talk. So the other part of it is that I work with Fortune 500 companies. And what I do is I help them to become 21st century organizations. Now, by no means does that happen overnight. And there are lots of hard conversations. Many times those conversations are not in front of the spotlight because folks, you know, they got all kinds of different things that they're going through. So we do some work there as well. So those are just a couple. I could go through about 5 other things, but I know we're short on time.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I want to get us to our closing thoughts. So this call to action and recommendations. I'm going to go to Tom first. What would you leave the audience with how we can move forward with creating equity and access to clean energy? I mean, the theme of this symposium was, energy versus power, a vision for the future. What's your vision for the future, Tom? I mean, vision for tomorrow. I mean, the future really tomorrow, and then, midterm and also long term. Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks. And I actually want to come back to the theme of urgency that Paula mentioned. I think that the greatest urgency right now is to ensure that we lay the foundation and create the culture and the structures to be able to do this right. And I agree that the sense of urgency can sometimes, cause us to panic and make decisions too quickly, take shortcuts, right? Not engage with communities and stakeholders the way we need to. But the urgency now is that, we have an administration in Washington that we can work with, that we can have conversations with, and we can influence. And right now, it's in charge of implementing the bills that we're talking about. And creating all of the precedents and all of the regulations and the culture of practice for how are we going to do this. If we get it wrong now, we're going to be in trouble for a long time. So, I think really leaning in to influence that is critically important. And so, that really means providing input and raising our voices to ensure that they are heard. And it means being cognizant that if we're not doing that, then the voices that are going to be heard are those voices that essentially are able to purchase their access to decision makers that are able to employ people with deep resumes in government. We need to be doing that, right? And we need to be sure that everything we're saying, and that those who are speaking for the public interest are informed by what communities understand about what equitable, fair implementation that can truly be transformative looks like.
Thank you for that. So going back to what Peggy said, we need to have think tanks active. She said we need to have C4s. Did she say we need to have C4s? Where are C4s at? We got C3s. We need C4. Okay, you got C4. We need more C4s, right? So we got to get in that space. Thank you for that, Tom. I'll go to you next, Mustafa. Closing thoughts. Call to action. Vision for the future. What do you think? Go ahead.
My grandmother says that you have power unless you give it away. We need to be focused on utilizing our power to hold people accountable, to hold accountability for ourselves, to make sure that as these dollars flow, does your neighborhood already have a vision, a plan that is literally spelled out? Because the resources are going to come quick, and you're going to have to be able to figure out which of these that you're going to plug in, unless the government gets itself together and actually creates these sets of holistic opportunities that I mentioned earlier. So for me, it is about us understanding that we have power. It is about us understanding that we have power, once again, with our vote, and understanding that it is not just about voting in the general election. It is about the midterms. It is about all these races that are happening on the county and the local level. It is about many folks inside of this room figuring out that you don't have to wait for somebody else to fill these offices, that you have all the skills and abilities, and what you may not have, you have a whole family of individuals who will stand beside you and help you. So you should be running for the city council or the county commission, because if we want to make real change happen, then we've got to do that. How do I know that? You look at a project like the Regenesis Project in Spartanburg, South Carolina, all the success that Harold Mitchell and the community members have had there, leveraging hundreds of millions of dollars. A core part of that was them actually understanding that they had to get engaged in that political process, that they had to get somebody on the city council so that when the doors shut and everybody else went out and those conversations were going on, they still had somebody who was there. And then eventually having somebody in the state house so that when those resources began to flow, he could redirect those to the communities that needed them the most. That is about our power. I want you all to take away from this that this is a transformational moment. This huge amount of money. And yes, there are some things that are inside of the IRA and some of these other conversations that evidently happen that most definitely will not be beneficial to our communities. But there's a huge amount of money that can be positive if we direct it in the right way. Y'all, I'll leave y'all with my final words, if that's all right.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
You know, Dr. King said that we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now.
That's right.
So now that we're all in this same boat, because climate don't care if you're black or white, doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat or independent, really don't care if you're wealthy or if you're trying to get your feet underneath of you. We have to take advantage of this opportunity, and all the folks that are in this boat with us, bring all those skills and blessings that God has given you for us to be able to make sure that we are embracing our humanity, but that we are also focusing on our North Star, which has to be justice.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And Paula, last word to you. Reflections, visions for the future.
Yeah, what I'm going to leave you with is this. Tomorrow is your first day of work. Tomorrow's your first day. And it's the first day of work in your first job. So you're going to be at it for a while. This is not the kind of thing that we can say, you know what, I was doing this for 18 months. This should be all good. We got a new president. We're done. No, ma'am. No, sir. How long have you been working at this?
Long time. Since I was 16.
So just know that, right? The change that we want to see, some of us may never really see it, but we will effectuate it. And that's okay. But we all have to just be that level of commitment. So just tomorrow's your first day of work. That's it.
Thank you. Let's thank our panel. This is a life's work, right? This is intergenerational work. This is change work. Y'all can stay for a second. Y'all cool. Y'all cool right there. I'm about to go ahead and just close this out. So I want to thank our panel. I want to thank everybody who attended the symposium, the 8th UMD Environmental Justice and Health Disparities Symposium. I think it was a grand success. I believe we had about 1,800 registrants day 1, day 2, close to 500 registrants for day 3. Again, the theme this year was energy versus power. But you heard from Mustafa and heard from many of our panelists, we have to build power, we have to grow power, right? That has to be the focus moving forward. Paul has said the work starts tomorrow, and it continues. This is life's work. You heard from Jalon White Newsom. She said about energy. What she said, I'm gonna remember what she said. You got to evolve. We thought the movement has to evolve, right? Right. We have to be nimble, right? You got to focus on environmental justice, right? You got to be generational, and we have to have youth. Did I forget something? Maybe I forgot responsibility. Yeah, not yield. Yeah, no yielding, right? We got to keep moving. Thank you. All this participation. Amen to that. We got to keep moving forward, right? And we also heard a theme. We got to focus on economic opportunities and development, economic justice, right? Magic, the tagline for Magic is putting the economy back in the hands of the people. Where's Carrie at? I want to make sure I say that tagline. Putting the power of the economy back into the hands of the people, okay? That's important. We're talking about is energy justice. We're talking about the clean energy future. So I just want to give a couple highlights. Appreciate everybody. I'm going to go through acknowledgements real quick. So I want to acknowledge the sponsors again. Meta, the Basel Earth Fund, Yellow Chair Foundation, some of the larger work, EDF, Sierra Club for this event, Namate, love the work of Namate, co-founder of Magic, provide a lot of support here. So appreciate my Namate brothers and sisters. National Wildlife Federation, US EPA, as y'all heard earlier, I wouldn't be on this stage without that Minority Association Institution Fellowship at HBCU, Alabama A&M University. So thank you, EPA. Union Concerned Scientists, NRDC, Icahn School of Medicine, the Kresge Foundation, Choose Clean Water, SRAP, School of Public Health, and Climate Exchange. Thank you again. And then, again, the Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition again. All the committed community partners were here who showed up, our green groups who've been supportive, all our elected officials, all the great speakers who came ready, prepared, who shared their knowledge and their wisdom and solutions, right? Right? The great Jesse Jackson said, you just can't problematize, you got to solutionize. Jesse never said that. That's what Sacoby said. But expert moderators, the COVID testing, I hope that went well. I appreciate y'all participating in that. We are the School of Public Health. The copying center, photographer, Milton Williams, stamps, the catering. We got, okay, again, don't leave, y'all. I got about 2,000 individual pieces of hors d'oeuvres that need to be consumed. There's a cash bar. You bring your own BYOB, whatever that means, but that's food at this event. So that's why I'm trying to hurry up to get y'all to the food. And remember, I never said it, it's in the Colony Ballroom. It's upstairs. So the food is upstairs. They sanitize the room with a COVID testing room. They sanitize it, got it all clean. But there's food, y'all. Okay, we got to break bread together, to build together, right? To build power, we got to get to know each other. So let's break some bread, okay? Thank the hotel, Marriott, all our great volunteers, the UMD students. We had high school students, our summer scholars program, summer scholars programs. Y'all stand up again. Interns who showed up, did posters, and y'all still in the room? Oh, okay. That's what I heard all the talking. Okay, cool. Summer scholars program, and then again, I'm still thanking people. Sorry. So I want to give a shout out to Pamela Bingham, our operations manager. I want to give a shout out to School of Public Health staff. We'll give a shout out to Vivek, one of the PhD students. I'm gonna give a shout out to Aria Warden, Anushi Garg. I'm gonna give a shout out to Noble. Noble was on the IT with the StreamYard, day 1, day 2. Shout out to Noble. And I'm gonna give the biggest shout out to Miss Shawnice King. Shawnice, where you at? She outside too? Y'all go get Shawnice. I want Shawnice to come in and get this love. Go outside, get Shawnice. Someone get Shawnice for me, please. Huh? Oh, let's bring them all in. Bring them all in. But I want to give special. Tell her come in. No, this is Shawnice. No, that's this Shawnice. This Shawnice. No, because this wouldn't have happened without her. Shawnice. I don't know. That's fine. She'd be fine. What's that? She's not. Oh, okay. Y'all give Shawnice a big round of applause. Woo! I was trying. Okay, so this part of the event is over. Are they coming in? Y'all come on in. Come on in. Okay. Come on in. Come in. Okay, come on in. Come on in. So these are our summer scholars, our first cohort of summer scholars. So I want to make sure y'all get love. They did a lot of research with Siege this summer, and they helped out with planning a symposium, and they also did posters. So all these great posters were done by the scholars. She didn't take photos. Yeah. And so just want to thank y'all, thank the team. Again, thank our closing panel. And then let's shift upstairs to eat that great food, all those crab cakes. Thank you. And you thank yourselves, everybody.
Okay, you know how hard it is to get Dr. Wilson off the mic, so I had to come up here. Everybody, this is going to be really quick. Guess who has a birthday this coming week? So I need it all together. Happy birthday, Dr. Wilson. Happy birthday to you.
Really?
He gets a little trophy.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a surprise. Now that's part of the doing too much countdown. But I appreciate